الله وما أصابك من سيئة فمن نفسك وأرسلناك للناس رسولا وكفى بالله شهيدا وكفى بالله شهيدا من يطع الرسول فقد أطاع الله ومن تولى فما أرسلناك عليهم حفيظا ويقولون طاعة ويقولون طاعة فإذا برزوا من عندك بيت طائفة منهم غير الذي تقول والله يكتب ما يبيتون والله يكتب ما يبيتون فأعرض عنهم وتوكل على الله وكفى بالله وكيلا أفلا يتدبرون القرآن أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا صدق الله العظيم.
Elhamdülillahi Rabbil Alemin ve salatu ve selamu ala seyyidil murselin ve ala alihi ve sahabeti ecma'in. Amma ba'd fa'udhu billahi mineşşeytanirracim. من عمل صالحا من ذكر من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. My respected brothers and elders and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been very kind to create us as Muslims, and He has made us eligible for a beautiful life. However, beautiful life does not come unconditionally, it comes conditionally. So we have to fulfill those conditions. And the first condition that we need to know about is the objective for which we've been created. Right? So if we ask this question, why am I here? And I don't mean why I'm here, in the Masjid today, but why I'm here in this world. Why? My purpose of creation. What is the purpose of my life? This is the million-dollar question, at least. So if we ask this question, what answer would we get? Huh? To worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes? What else? Second opinion? Or that's muttafiq alayh, everyone's agreed on that?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to do it and not do the things that we are prohibited.
So that's pretty much to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yeah? Now let me ask you a question. If we were not the recipients of the Quran, would we know the answer to that question? The human being with his intellect, with his eyes and ears and his IQ and all that, would he be able to understand why he's here on the earth? No. So we're very fortunate that we are the recipients of wahy, the recipients of revelation. Otherwise, it would be impossible to understand this very simple question. We can understand the purpose of everything around us in the creation. But our own purpose, that's a dilemma. Unless the creator of this universe actually informs us. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually has informed us. And that's it. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I have not created the jinn and the men except to be continuously engaged in my servitude. إلا ليعبدون. Actually this إلا ليعبدون, that's what when we're saying ubudiyah, actually, this pointer doesn't work for this, but if you see you see the yellow letters in the Arabic language. Now, maybe those who know the Arabic language, then this is quite apparent. But those who don't know the Arabic language, so this is a verbal construct. Illa li ya'budun, ya'budun. It is what we call in the Arabic language fi'al mudari. Fi'al mudari is the present and continuous sense and tense. So continuously being engaged in the servitude of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to do that, we have to be continuously engaged in the focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for that requires, that requires exercise, that requires, practice. So we deal with that inshallah later on. So, but this is why we're here in the world. Now, if we didn't know this, from revelation, there's no way for the human being to know this. This is why we have the world as it is today. So this purpose of our creation, which is called ubudiyah, being the slave, being cognizant of the fact that we're the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are here for a life of servitude, when we are continuously focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understanding who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and then understanding what He wants from us and to be engaged in that. So this ubudiyah is basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's obedience and servitude out of His love and reverence. There's a lot of propaganda out there now that, Islam is spread by the sword, enter Islam or lose your head, kind of thing. There's no such thing like that. La ikraha fid deen. There's no compulsion in entering into Islam. Jibreel alayhi salam is not going to come down, with a submachine gun and point it at anybody's head and say, look, enter Islam or else. It never happened and it never will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us intelligence. He's given us eyes to see the creation. He's given us ears to hear the creation. He's given us mind to ponder over the creation. And if we look around us at the universe around us and the universe within us and all the systems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, so the intelligence of the human being is sufficient to point to the fact that there is a creator. We are creation and there is one creator. And therefore, the belief in the creator, that is not something that we need. We don't need revelation for that. We've been given intelligence for that. Now how to act upon that, for that we need revelation. You see? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this intelligence and the faculties to reflect upon His creation, to reflect upon His majesty, reflect upon His beneficence upon us. You see? And when we reflect upon that and we realize that we have a creator who has created us out of nothing and is sustaining this entire universe and controlling this entire universe and has given us everything from what we have, then we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of His love and beneficence. Why do we love our mother and father? Why? I mean, is it by default? Or is there some relationship? And there was a building of a relationship through what? Through love and affection and care and inayat, as we say in the Arabic language. Continuous, you see, attention and fulfilling the needs and then the desires and the wants, right? And therefore the mother is actually more than the father in that regard because she does more, right? She's the one that stays up all the hours at night. You know, the father goes in the other room and sleeps, right? So much love, you know, that the small children have for their parents, you see. So what about the one who's created us, is sustaining us, is controlling the entire universe, and has subjected the entire universe for our benefit? So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us intelligence and to reflect upon that. So Ubudiyya, it requires a reflection, it requires an attention, it requires exercise, it requires us to cut off from the grind that we live our lives in day in and day out from time to time. So at least 5 times a day, we've Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, at least, so that we cut off from the material surroundings that have sort of drowned out the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His mercy upon us. So Ubudiyya, there's 3 very common terms that we all know, we all hear, but we need to understand their actual meaning, which I found that many of us don't, and it causes a problem. For example, Islam. What does Islam mean? What does it mean? Peace. Well, peace comes from the root, but actually Islam doesn't really mean peace. You won't have peace without it, that's for sure, but it is not actually virtually peace. Aslama yuslimu islama. Aslama. It means to submit. Submission to Allah. To Islam, this is not a philosophy, it's not a theory, it's not a religion. I don't know what they mean by religion anyway. They'll have to sort that out. Martin would tell you, he's an English scholar. I can't figure out the language. It doesn't make a lot of, it's not a very spiritual language, right? But you see, this is very clear. Islam, submission to the Creator, to Allah. That's what Islam means. Okay, now the next term that we need to understand clearly is a Muslim. We're all Muslims, right? Alhamdulillah. So what does that mean? What is a Muslim? Exactly. This is the ism file. This is the active participle, if you will. The one who submits. So if we're submitting, then actually we're a Muslim. And if we're not submitting, then what? It looks shaky, right? At least. Okay, now, having said that, let's be careful because, okay, he's not praying, he's not offering zakat, he's not following sunnah, he's not a Muslim. Chop his head. Is that how it works? No, absolutely not. Because, see, submission has various levels and stages, you see. The least of which is to submit to the fact that Allah is one. And the risalat, the messengership that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent all the prophets, it ended with Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to submit to that. And by the way, if we don't know that, or we haven't been informed about that, we have a whole lifetime to get that straightened out, if Allah gives us tawfiq. So there's no compulsion in that, by the way, as I mentioned earlier, you see. So once we understand it, and we believe, and we submit to this concept that yes, there is one Allah, there is one and one alone worthy of worship, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his prophet. So this is the lowest level of submission. And so a person who says so and believes so, he's a Muslim to that extent. And it goes from that level right up to Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that level. And every stage in between. Much similar to the comparison or the analogy of a sick person and a well person. Now you have a person that's in like ICU, okay, you know, I mean, he's breathing, his heart is pumping, but that's it. He can't talk, he can't see, he can't work, he can't pray, he can't do anything, but he's still alive, right? So say this guy's, you know, he's useless. So what's the point, you know? Let's just dig a hole and bury the guy. I mean, what's the point? Is that okay? And if we did that, what happens? A person who would take that individual and bury him in the ground, what would you call that person? He's a murderer. He stands guilty of murder, first degree, premeditated, by the way. Right? Now we have another person that has full capacity, he has full capability, you know, everything's working, and he's active in the community, he's praying, he's fasting, he's, you know, muamalat, and maybe he's the president of the country, who knows? So there's a big difference between the level of that life and the level of this life, right? But in any case, there is a common denominator of life. This fellow's alive and he's alive. So similarly in Islam, a Muslim, you know, he might have nothing but the belief in kalima, and ultimately that will get him through. But that's quite a different proposition from a person who has full capacity, is trying to follow all the orders of Rasul, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way of Rasul. So a Muslim is one who submits. Now the last thing that we need to understand is deen. What is deen? We all hear that all the time, our deen, deen Islam, and so forth. So what do we mean by deen? Path, that's part of it. Has something to, yes, that's part of it, but that's not the whole story. We need a comprehensive definition of deen. So it's very clear. When we say our deen is Islam, what do you mean by that, you know? Well, we mean by that the total system of submission. That's very simple. Islam is submission, right? The person who does it, who submits, he's called a Muslim, and deen is that whole system of submission. That's a deen. And so it has a very huge scope. Did you want to take a picture of that? Yeah, you can go ahead. Okay. So the scope is very vast. All activities of life, everything that you do, the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep, every activity falls under the scope of deen. And all the roles that you have in life. You know, our brothers over here, they're slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, salikun, abidun. They're husbands, perhaps. They're definitely sons, because you didn't come here without father and mother. So your sons, your perhaps fathers, your neighbors, your relatives. You might be a businessman. You might be, you know, having some position in the community. We have various roles in life. So all those roles in life that we are active in, that we play in the drama of life. So all those roles come under the scope of Islam. And Islam tells us how to do that. As our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was a role model in all roles of life that he actually, you see, participated in. He was also a father, he was a husband, he was a neighbor, he was a relative, he was leader of the army, he was, He was commander-in-chief. He was head of the state. He was a Rasul. He was messenger. He was Nabi. He was, all these things. And he performed with excellence in all of those roles. So we have something to learn in all of these roles. So we need to be very close to the Sirat of our Rasul to learn this. And the trick of the whole thing is balance. Somebody's a star performer in the office, but when he gets home, nobody knows him. or his relatives have, no connection with the fellow or whatever. So usually, if somebody's a star performer in some role, usually it's at the expense of other roles in life. And this is unacceptable. We have to be cognizant of all the roles and try and keep at least a minimum performance level in all of those roles. So that's a lifelong struggle. Okay? So deen, if you want to look at it in another sort of dimension, you could say it's an operational application of ubudiyya, that whole concept of ubudiyya that we talked about, slavery. So it's how do we practically exercise our being slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every action. So that's basically what deen is. And if you like, you could sort of graphically illustrate it like this tree, you see. This tree it's growing, it has roots, and it has a trunk. And actually, in our workshop, we go into this. Who actually attended our workshop? We had a detailed. Who was there? Who else? Yeah. So you remember this? It's kind of refreshing. We're refreshing our memories. We're going to be having this again in Bilal Masjid, inshallah, on Sunday. Bilal Masjid, right? Yeah. So we're going to have this workshop. So we're just sort of going over it, and we're going to introduce other modules to you tonight because we don't have much time. So we're just going to introduce to you the rest of the modules which you haven't already taken, and then we'll see how we can perhaps set that up, and in future visits, inshallah, we'll do that. So as you see, we have a whole tree which actually is mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a method, as a parable. Alam tara kayfa daraba Allahu mathalan kalimatan tayyiba ka shajaratin tayyiba. Do you not see that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned a parable about a beautiful, goodly, very productive tree, like the kalima when it's alive in the human being, in the Muslim. So the Muslim man, actually, he ends up like this tree. You see, this tree, it's giving all of these wonderful fruits from the wonderful branches that it has. You'll see ibadat, you'll see muamalat, and akhlaq, and adab, and all of these various branches of Sharia, all these various branches of deen. And they all give various types of fruits and benefits in their character, in their transactions, in their worship, in all these aspects of life. However, it requires nourishment. Just as a tree requires nourishment, so the tree of belief, the tree of iman, the tree of ubudiyya, it requires also nourishment. For that nourishment, you'll see at the roots, dawah, ta'aleem, tarbiyah, has to be continuously dimension of the life of a Muslim. Dawah, he's listening to dawah, he's giving dawah, there's tarbiyah, removing the animalistic tendencies, the satanic tendencies of the nafs and the environment, and Satan himself. Cleansing oneself from these traits and embellishing one with angelic traits. You see? So this is a constant struggle and a constant effort. And then learning all of the injunctions of Sharia, learning all the ways of the Sunnah of our Nabi, so inwardly and outwardly. So this is a continuous process that has to be going on a daily basis. Okay, and and as we had last time, inshallah, on Sunday, we'll have some exercises that we'll practice how we can develop that within ourselves, inshallah. Okay. So in summary, it's basically, what is the purpose of life? Ubudiyya. Ma khalaqtul jinna wal insa illa liya'budun. Allah says, I didn't say, Allah says. And so if we actually fulfill this purpose, then what's in it for us? What do we get out of it? Well, you'll get the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you'll get paradise. And then, Ya ayyatuha an-nafs al-mutma'inna, O you soul at peace, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiya. Return to your Lord, pleased and pleasing to Him. Fadkhuli fi ibadi. enter among my, who? Slaves. The people who get to Jannat, the free people of paradise, they were slaves in this world. And if you want to be free in this world and do just like Nike says, just do it, you know. So you're not going to, this is not going to be for you. There's a whole different paradigm for you. There's a whole nother, you know, end result waiting. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us his slaves in this short life so that we'll be free men and women forever and ever and ever in paradise. Say Ameen. Allahumma Ameen. Thumma Ameen. Fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati. Enter my paradise. So that's the end of the chapter, you see. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us. So this beautiful life, this life of Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, so it is a life of health. It's a life of success. It's a life of all good things, you know. So that we call this the workshop the healthy, meaningful lifestyle through holistic Islamic health. So when we talk about healthy, meaningful lifestyle, so that's where we get this HML thing from, right? So healthy, when we say healthy, what do you think about when you think about healthy? If I say, you know, this guy's healthy, so what comes to mind? You know, huh? Physically healthy? Okay. Mind is healthy? Yeah, otherwise it's going to be a problem, right? We got a lot of unhealthy minds out there too, yeah. Huh? Heart is healthy, yeah. What else? How about emotions? Huh? Soul, absolutely. So actually, what do these implements imply? Well, meaningful, it's a clear purpose of life. We know why we exist, you know, which we talked about already. And then health, Nabi alayhi salatu says a very interesting thing, al-mu'min al-qawi, khayrun wa habbu ila Allahi min al-mu'min al-da'if. The strong believer is more virtuous and more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak believer. Now the question is, what's a strong believer and what's a weak believer? Who's a mu'min al-qawi and who's a mu'min al-da'if? So what do you think about that? Mu'min al-qawi, strong mu'min, who's that?
Is the one who submits himself to Allah's orders and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, follow that's what Allah made us.
Yeah.
And fulfill that and work every day.
Okay. Yeah. What else? Where else does he need to be strong? If we think about that, strength. Because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam didn't actually specify what kind of strength he was referring to. So he just left it to us to sort of ponder over that. So it's what we call in the Arabic language mutlaq. You know, it's just general strength. So if you think about that, actually any kind of strength that would be useful, that would be beneficial, that will help us on our way. Any kind of strength. And one of the most important strengths is strength of purpose, strength of irada, quwwat al-irada, azm. فإذا عزمت فتوكل الله فاصبر كما صبر أولو العزم. Nabi Sallallahu said, be patient like the ulul azm, those of the highest of determination of the prophets. All the prophets had extremely high determination, but some had even the highest levels, 5 of them. Among them are Nabi Sallallahu. So, if we look at this, we can probably come to the conclusion that there's a lot of dimensions of health and strength that a Muslim should be aware of, and he should be very much, you know, haris, as it were. Haris meaning, you know, he's always after it. He's always striving, he's always struggling to get it, and he's very concerned to keep hold of it. So, spiritual strength, spiritual health, intellectual health, as our brother said, physical health also. You know, Islam, it requires a lot of doing, right? Ibadat, muamalat, service, khidmat, all these things, you know. It requires, you know, so suppose if we're, you know, we're stricken with diabetes and heart problems and high blood pressure and cancer and. So is it going to be easy to live a life of ubudiyah? It's going to be very difficult. So all of these types of health we need to actually be cognizant of and be very particular in looking after it and preserving it. Emotional health. You know, we got all these things, but we're emotionally very much upset, which is very, very common today. Stress, tension, depression, clinical depression. I mean, serious depression. I mean, now just about everybody is going through that kind of thing. I mean, the rate of all of these type of emotional disorders are so much pronounced in this present day and age. I mean, this is a huge area. Social health. Social health. Do we have healthy relationships with one another? Within our families, within our relatives, within our neighbors, within our communities? Even we as Muslims, a little difference over some minor thing, we're enemies. Start killing one another. It's crazy. So we really have to work on that. So this social, health is a huge, and we're social beings. So that's a huge dimension that needs work on. And then end of the day, we've got all of those dimensions, but the environment that we live in is destroyed. You don't have decent air to breathe. You don't have pure food to eat. You have pollution and toxins, throughout your... So is it going to be easy to exist and live a life of ubudiyya? We'll cease to exist in an extremely toxic environment. So we're also, as Muslims, first and foremost, and there's a lot of talk of environment now, and every passing day it becomes more and more stark to each and every human being on the planet that we're destroying this planet, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us khulafa, right? He's made us vice regents, not only of ourselves and of the human community, of the very earth that we live on. So we need to be out on the front line in terms of environmental issues and preserving the environment. So therefore, in our series of these workshops, so we look into all of these various dimensions, and we try and do some, we look into these things and look for some hands-on, practical things that everybody can sort of start implementing, It's not like we're going to have to, become PhDs in all of these things, but there's some practical things that we can do that can help us moving towards health in all these dimensions. So the first module, which some of our brothers and sisters have actually joined us a few years back, so that covers the Ruhani health, the theory and practicals. So what we look at is Iman. We look at Iman in detail because that's the basis of it, right? What's the importance and the impact in both the worlds? What's its definition in reality? What actually is Iman? And how do we build it? How do we strengthen it? And how do we protect it? And then those activities, those a'mal, Ruhani a'mal that actually develop the soul, and nurture the soul and strengthen it. Salat, Quran, dhikr, salat ala nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, istighfar, dua, fiqh al-maut, pondering over the death, tawbah, repentance, to all these type of things. So we actually practice those, and we try and develop, a higher level of these a'mal in our life through these practices. So there's theory and there's also practical exercises. So this workshop in its full form, it takes about 2 days, as we had it last time. Okay, on Sunday we'll be having a repeat of that. It'll be a little bit more condensed because we don't have as much time as we did last time. But for those who've already done it, so it's kind of a refresher course. That's why I continually do it, because I need a refresher course every day, and I think most of us would feel the same. So we're going to be having this module on Sunday at Masjid Bilal, inshallah. And then physical health, the why and the how. Why? Does Quran say anything about physical health? Yes, it does. Sunnah, yes, absolutely. View of our ulama, you'll be amazed. And then specialists of our present day. So we look into that and see, get an idea that how important that is, and what importance, our aslaf and our ancestors have placed on that, as well as the Quran and Sunnah. So we'll look into movement and rest. We start with that, actually. People think, you just have to eat good stuff and leave the bad stuff. That's about 40% of the equation. About 60% is correct movement and rest. So we look into that and we see, from the standpoint of Quran, Sunnah, etc., about these areas, nourishment and hunger. It's not just about what you eat, it's about not eating. And actually not eating is probably more important for us than eating. As one of our ulama, he says, health food is junk food when your stomach is full. Did you hear that? Health food is junk food when your stomach is full. So this constant munching, you know, we just got done with breakfast, now tea. In the Urdu culture, we have this chai wa ghaira. Ghaira, you know, other. It goes on and on and on and on till lunchtime, you know. And then lunch. And then after lunch, you know, then this asriya and, you know, the afternoon tea. And it just goes on. So your system never has a chance to really shut down until Ramadan. And then when Ramadan comes, alhamdulillah, by default, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a yearly servicing. And then when we break that fast, we just destroy. You know, it's like we're building the castle in the sand. Then the tide comes in and just, you know, destroys it. Just look at how we... So we have the opportunity. Everything is built into our deen, but since we're misusing it, we don't understand the concepts. So we need to actually look into these things in detail because, you know, we've only got one life, so we need to get the maximum benefit out of it. We don't get a second chance, isn't it? Yeah. So we look at nourishment, hunger. We look at cure and prevention. As we say, prevention is better than cure. We don't wait till we get sick, but we try and prevent sickness to overtake us, and that's not a very difficult thing to do. Basically, living a good lifestyle will keep you healthy. Inshallah ta'ala, bi tawfiqillah. So there's exercises that we do. We come up with practical plans. Everybody should actually come up with a plan. I think those who attended last time, they would have had a plan, and we can review those plans and see how it's going. Right, Amjad Bhai? Can we review your plan and see how's it going? Inshallah. Okay. And then intellectual health. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us so much intellect in the first place? You know, so we know how to, you know, succeed on Wall Street? Is that the main thing? Or there's some higher purpose? Yes, there is a higher purpose. So actually we look into that in detail and try and come to terms with that. And then we come to realize that actually there's 3 tiers of knowledge. The highest is about Allah Jalla Jalaluhu Himself. Right? And once we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we need to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. That's the life of Ubudiyya. First we have to know our ma'bud, who are we worshipping, and then know how to worship Him. And then as we're human beings, we have to exist in the planet, and we have physical existence, so that physical existence and its support also comes into the realm of knowledge. We should know how to do that effectively. So physical support systems that facilitate the worship of Allah. Shelter, you know, your professions, you know, your crafts, the interactions, and so forth and so on that we have with one another. So all of these things, you know, we should be top of the line. And if they're jaiz activities, we can make those activities and our professions and our crafts and our jobs and our careers also part of our life of servitude. And for that, we deal with that in detail, and the how of doing that in our Ubudiyya business model. And in that, that's a whole system that was developed. And at another time, perhaps we can give a presentation on that, and we can see how we do that. Okay. So what we do is, in this particular module, we kind of analyze ourselves, do a gap analysis of ourselves, and see where do we stand. How much do I know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sufficiently, or is there some gap there? Do I need to fill that gap? Do I know effectively the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I'm a businessman, I'm a lawyer, I'm a civil servant, whatever I am. I'm a husband, I'm a wife. Do I know all the injunctions that I need to know in regards to that? So we do a gap analysis and we try and see where we have deficiencies and bridge those deficiencies and gaps. Okay? And then we make a plan to do that, a strategy to fulfill those gaps. Okay? So that's what we try and cover in this module. And then nafsani, the emotional health, which is very critical. So what we look at is, number one, human health and domains of happiness. What really makes a human being happy, by the way? Is it really what the American dream tells us, or is it something else? So we'll find out that actually it has nothing to do with what's outside of you. It has everything to do with what's inside of you. So maybe we're looking in the wrong place altogether. So where is human happiness? And obviously in our deen it's very clearly defined and expressed. So, and secondly, human cognition, thinking. How do we think? Are we, you know, sometimes our patterns of thinking are really not correct, you know? For example, somebody's looking at me, and I say, this guy, he's thinking bad about me. How do I know he's thinking bad about me? Maybe he's thinking good about me. So why do I? So this is a very, very blatant sort of example, but many times our thinking processes, we need to analyze those. We need to actually step back and see our mode of thinking, our thinking patterns. Are they correct? Are they incorrect? Are they causing problems for ourselves and others? So how do we think and how do we look at the process of thinking? This requires some step back. And it's simple stuff. It's not, you know, a PhD type of stuff. It's very simple stuff that we can all understand. Emotions and emotional intelligence. We need to understand our own emotions and how to deal with them and understand them, what triggers, you know, our emotions to flare up and so on, and understand other people's. If we want to have good relationships, even with ourselves and with others, so we need to understand, we need to have what is known as emotional intelligence. And Islam is very clear, you know, on the necessity there. So we look at that also in some practical things we can do to improve ourselves in this field. And then obviously nafs behavioral training. Tazkiyah, that's what tazkiyah is actually all about. Tarbiyah, tazkiyah. So it's not like something psychology came up with. We know that from, you know, every Nabi that came into this world, he was involved in that, you know. So we look at that, some practical things. How can we go about that? Okay? Relationships and empathy, you know. For example, here in America, you know, when you go to somebody who's actually, you know, like when you call, you know, somebody on the phone, some service-based, this call is being recorded for quality control, you know. And so just see how that person talks with you. Yes, Mr. Martin, how can I help you? Is there anything else I can do for you, you know? So actually this is very nice, but I mean, why is that person so helpful to us? I mean, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to go to paradise, or there's some material objective you need behind that. So actually we should be more empathetic. We should be more concerned and considerate of fellow human beings than anybody on the planet. Unfortunately, like every other area, we are so far behind where we used to excel in all these areas. So we need to look at that and how we can, you know, become more empathetic in our relationships and strengthen our relationships and be better human beings as our religion requires from us. Okay? And then we look at the social health module. So basically healthy social relations and society, how to live within society. So we look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's amazing social engineering. You know, it just didn't happen like that. There is an engineering, there's divine design in our social structure. So we need to stand back and look at that and marvel, you know, subhanAllah. So we look at that and we kind of, you know, step back and sort of analyze that and marvel over that. And then we look at the chain of subordination and the principles of justice, hierarchy, not anarchy. Anarchy never worked, you know. There's hierarchy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put people in various positions of authority and some under others in that line of hierarchy. And it works like that. We need to understand that. However, it needs to be on the principles of justice. Not I come out with some empty, you know, promises and, you know, have a good time laughing at everyone that were gullible enough to believe that I was really for real about those things. No. You're all shepherds and responsible for your flocks. So we need to understand that whole system of hierarchy and our responsibility therein. And actually it's a beautiful system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has engineered for the betterment of the entire humanity. So we look into that. And then we look into the social relationship constructors and destructors. There are certain very small behaviors that can either just amazingly build relationships. There's also behaviors that can, you know, without even thinking, can totally destroy relationships, isn't it? One kalima, we didn't even think about it. The Nabi ﷺ says it throws the person who said it 70 years into the fire of Jahannam. You know, we just sort of abuse someone, make a joke of someone, like the comedians, you know, that we see on TV every day. You know, that's what they do. Make fun of another guy. You make fun of somebody, whoever they are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like that, and it destroys relationships. And if you praise someone in a proper way, or you're kind to someone, so what are the simple things that we can do that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has mentioned to us in the Quran, in the Sunnah, so we can build relationships and save ourselves from destructive nature of very simple things. So we look at that and we mention them, and we try and put those into our life. Digital addiction. The 21st century top medical disaster. That's what it is. There's nothing more destructive in this particular century than this digital addiction. It's destroying everything that we have. So we need to learn how to deal with it. We can't live without it because we're in the web, as they say, caught in the web. Somebody wrote a book by the way. Anyone seen that book? It's called Caught in the Web, this guy wrote, and that's exactly what's happened. So how do we get out of that web, and how do we manage, digital use? And we could call that digital dieting. So how do we do that? We can do that, inshallah, with a little bit of willpower. It's possible to do. So we look at that, and we try and come to grips with that. And then the specific social relationships, rights, and challenges. What are the various, as I said, the various social constructs that we have? Parents, children, wife, husband, right? Relatives, neighbors, fellow Muslims, non-Muslims. There's so many different constructs. So we look at all of those. What are the challenges that we face in those constructs? And what are the rights and the regulations that Islam has to say about those? Okay, so that's what we look at in that module. That's a 2-day module. Obviously, that's quite, there's a lot of stuff there. And then lastly, the environmental health in our role. So environmental health. So we look at the dimensions of the environment. Is the environment just the physical, or there's spiritual, moral, ethical? So there's so many dimensions to the environment that we live in. So we look at all of that. And then we ponder over the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us vice regents of the earth, and what's the implication to us? We're responsible for it. So if the earth is being destroyed, who's first and foremostly responsible for that? We, me and you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. So then, if that be the case, so what are some practical steps that we can do to improve the environment? Somebody says, well, that's a governmental level. What can we do, Look, there's something every human being can do. If I save, for example, just to give a very small example, when we make wudu, now every one of us makes wudu, alhamdulillah, at least 2-3 times a day, right? Now if you turn on your tap and just put a bucket under the water that you're using, just see how much water is being used. And so we actually do this in this. So you have somebody just make wudu and put the tap on, and you'll see it's about 5 to 10 liters of water. Okay? And then we give the same individual a half a liter and say, okay, make wudu with this. And he does it, or she does it. And we don't even tell them how you can do it. They figure it out. They do it. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to make wudu with that amount of water, even less than that. So suppose that means 3 times a day, suppose I'm wasting at least around 4.5 liters of water daily. Daily. I mean, every time. So that means daily it's about 14 to 20 liters of water daily I'm wasting. Okay, everybody else in my family, suppose I have a family of 5 times that, and then the community, suppose like Karachi, 25 million people. How much water is being wasted? Pakistan. Who's from Pakistan? Isn't that amazing? They say Pakistan is the number 4 country water stressed in the world. Number 4 in the world. You've got 5 huge rivers flowing through your country. You've got 9 of the highest peaks on the face of the earth. You've got glaciers galore. You've got all these rivers, and you don't have water. What are you talking about? You have water. You don't know what to do. You're wasting the water. In the monsoon rains, we get so much rain that we could be exporting water, but it all runs down, erodes the landscape, and goes into the sea, and that's the end of it. And we're saying we're water stressed. So please, IMF, come and bail us out. Come on, World Bank, make a $10 billion dam for us, which is going to further destroy the thing. So there's very simple things that we can do to remedy these situations. So we need to learn about those things, okay? So like this, we talk about, the energy, we talk about water, we talk about the earth, we talk about waste, and all these things. So the simple things that we can all do as a individual, as a family, as a community, as an ummah. So there's a lot of things, and how we can actually work with the governments wherever we live and collaborate, We can do a lot, inshallah. Okay, and then there's an introduction. Now this is a term, permaculture. Homework for everybody here is write down this word, permaculture. Okay? And look it up, Google it, and just see what you come up with. You're going to see a whole system of saving the environment. And actually, alhamdulillah, one of the top permaculturists in the world, my mother is also a permaculturist. And so we actually grew up like this from childhood, with natural gardening systems, and just basically understanding natural systems and enhancing them, working as traditional people used to do. Okay? So just look that up, and then we're going to give you an introduction into permaculture and how we can, through very simple interventions and working with natural systems with the enhancement of modern technology, using it for some positive, working with nature rather than destroying it and going against nature, using technological advancements to enhance already natural systems that Allah SWT has engineered. So we can do that through this system, and that's the final and sixth module that we go through. So hopefully, inshallah, we'll, in the ensuing visits, we'll try and, if you're interested, so himmat farmai, and set it up, and we'll make some. I'll be coming back, and by the way, I'll be coming back next year in December. We have some workshops in Chicago already set up, so maybe around that time we can set up something for over here, so you can discuss that among yourselves and come up with some solutions for that. So that's what I wanted to present, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. And perhaps any of you who can make it with us on Sunday will be there, inshallah, at Masjid Bilal. Okay? Any questions? Any comments? Mm-hmm.
You really think that by being able to do all this water crisis, because that's what you're talking about, be able to really come to grips with it?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And there is no role of our being so disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Well, that's the first thing we talk about. We talk about Rouhani first.
Yeah, and in that
Yeah.
respect, the Rouhani that you're talking about, Rouhani education, and I think to put it in a proper perspective, if we have Rouhani guidance, then all those health that we talk
Exactly. Jazakallah khair. Yeah. So just, if we go back there, then, you see? So all those dimensions, and just as you said, if that Rouhani is actually what's giving it the light, it's giving it that's the driver behind the whole thing.
if that is not there, all the rest are there, Rouhani guidance is not there, this becomes something that is going to work against the human beings.
So that's why I'm saying let's do it us, because and that's why, especially when we have to talk to the youngsters, particularly the youngsters who are in the universities. I love to talk and interact with these kids because nobody else can do these things. I mean, they're teaching all these things in Harvard and Yale and MIT. Just a couple of days ago, we were in Brown University, So I'm looking at these kids. Now, these kids, whatever they're teaching you, but they're not giving you the fundamental. They're not giving you the purpose of life. So if we Muslims, and particularly our youth, if they get these things right, then we are the people that can actually present solutions to the world. Because without the Creator's instructions, without His stamp of approval, it's not going to happen. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. If Allah wants it to happen, it's going to happen. If not, sorry, it will never happen. So that's it's just like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. It's a lot of zeros. It looks nice, but actually it equals what? 0. But put a 1 in the front, then what do you get? 10, 100, 1,000, million, trillion. So yes, absolutely, it's a very important point. And that's why we start with Rouhani, and we need to get that lesson first. That's why in Makkah Mukarramah, 13 years of Rouhani training. Then all the rest of the form and shape came in Medina Munawwara after we got that right. So, yeah. Jazakumullah khair. Well, I've had about 40, 50 years of training. I still haven't gotten it totally right, but I'm trying, But Nabi Sallallahu Nabi, the best teacher who ever was to come and ever will come, and the best students, Sahaba radiallahu anhu, whoever came and will come, 13 years of training in Iman. And we expect that in 2 days workshop we're going to get it all right. Well, that's wishful thinking, but it's a start. So once you start, we have a saying, Man sara ala darb fawasal. You start walking on the track, and then ultimately, if you keep going, you'll reach. The Chinese say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So now we only have 999,000, to go or something. So inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq, and inshallah, hopefully we'll see you on Sunday and ensuing mulaqat, ensuing meetings, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaykum.